Betrayal never begins loudly, it creeps in softly, wearing the face of someone you once trusted without question. It's not the strangers that break you, it's the ones you let too close, the ones you defended when others warned you, the ones whose laughter blended with yours in moments of joy. She wasn't just a friend, she was someone I believed was part of my world, someone who knew my secrets, my fears, and the battles I fought in silence. I never imagined that the same hands I once held in friendship would one day be the ones to push me into the fire. Trust, when given so purely, becomes a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. It gives them power to shape your emotions, to twist your truth, to weaponize your weaknesses. I didn't see the storm coming because it came disguised as concern, as kindness, as care. She knew exactly where to strike, because she knew where I was unguarded. At first, the signs were small. The subtle comments, the quiet doubts she planted in others, the way she began to step into spaces that once belonged to me. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was overreacting. That's how betrayal works, it convinces you that your instincts are wrong. You start to silence your own voice just to keep the peace. You tell yourself that friendship matters more than pride, that misunderstanding is a smaller price than confrontation. But behind every smile she gave was a calculation, behind every compliment, an agenda. I thought we were walking the same path, but she was digging holes for me to fall into. There's a unique kind of pain in watching someone you love turn into your enemy. It doesn't happen in an instant, it's a slow transformation. You begin to see flashes of it in their eyes, in their words, in the way they start celebrating your smallest failures. I remember the day I realized that her laughter wasn't joy, it was satisfaction. She had begun weaving stories, twisting truths, using pieces of my life as weapons. It wasn't enough for her to win, she needed me to lose. That's when I understood that envy wears the face of admiration, until it no longer needs to hide. I tried to hold on to the version of her I used to know. The one who stood by me, who celebrated my successes, who shared my dreams. But that version was gone, replaced by someone driven by jealousy and insecurity. She couldn't stand to see me rise, couldn't accept that my light didn't dim hers. Every good thing that came my way became a reminder of what she didn't have. So, she decided if she couldn't have peace, neither would I. She started whispering lies in places that mattered most, turning friends into strangers, strangers into enemies. Slowly, I became isolated, misunderstood, painted as someone I wasn't. It's strange how quickly people believe poison, when it's spoken softly enough. Still, I stayed silent. I thought silence was dignity. I thought it was strength. I believed that truth always finds its way back. But silence can also be a prison when your name is being dragged through the mud. I watched her tear at everything I built, my reputation, my relationships, my confidence. Each attack was calculated, each move designed to make me question my own worth. It wasn't just an attempt to ruin my life, it was an attempt to erase me from the place I had rightfully earned. The betrayal cut deeper, because it came from someone who once promised to protect me. There's something haunting about betrayal, it makes you doubt not just the betrayer, but yourself. You begin to replay every moment, searching for signs you missed, wondering how you could have been so blind. You question your kindness, your choices, your very ability to trust again. I remember lying awake at night, replaying her words, the moments that once felt sincere, but now sounded rehearsed. I tried to make sense of it, but betrayal never makes sense. It's not logical, it's emotional warfare disguised as love. Every encounter after that felt heavy. Her presence became a reminder of the damage she caused, and yet she carried herself like the victim. That's the thing about people like her, they don't just betray you, they twist the narrative until you become the villain in their story. She played her role well, soft-spoken, wounded, pretending to be the one who was wronged. And for a while, people believed her. That was the hardest part, watching the truth get buried under her lies while I was left standing in the wreckage she created. But what she never understood was that betrayal doesn't destroy strong souls, it reveals them. Every knife she threw made me tougher, every wound she caused made me wiser. I learned to see through masks, to read between smiles, to trust actions over words. She thought breaking my trust would break me, but instead, it forced me to rebuild myself with stronger walls and sharper instincts. The betrayal became a turning point, a moment where I stopped depending on others for validation and started finding strength within myself. She tried to take my peace, my dignity, my identity, but in doing so, she exposed her own emptiness. What she saw as weakness in me was actually endurance. What she mistook for surrender was patience. I was never fighting her. I was fighting the version of myself that once needed her approval. That's the hidden cost of betrayal. It destroys the illusion, but it also sets you free. Once I stopped trying to understand. The destruction didn't begin with explosions or loud confrontations. It began in whispers, in quiet exchanges behind closed doors, in moments that felt too insignificant to notice. She didn't come forward with open attacks. She came with subtle manipulations, using charm as her weapon and deception as her shield. The way she moved was calculated, deliberate, as if she had studied the art of tearing someone down without ever appearing guilty. That's how the silent destruction began, slow, creeping, invisible to those who weren't looking closely. The world still saw her as the same smiling friend, while beneath that surface she was sowing seeds of chaos that would take root in my life. It was a performance, and I was the unknowing character in her well-rehearsed script. At first, it was just small distortions of truth. A word twisted here, a story retold there, a subtle shift in tone when she spoke about me to others. The difference between honesty and manipulation is often just the intent behind it, and her intent was clear, to make me appear less, to turn admiration into suspicion. People started looking at me differently, not because of what I did, but because of what they thought I did. She had found her power in invisibility, in making me question my own reality, while she quietly gained control of the narrative. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most, it was the realization that she enjoyed it, that every small victory she gained from my pain made her feel significant. I remember the first time I felt something was off. The energy around me shifted, conversations grew shorter, eyes lingered longer with silent judgment. I couldn't understand why, but she always seemed to appear just when the silence grew uncomfortable, pretending to comfort me, pretending to be the one still on my side. That was her trick. She'd burn the bridge and then offer to help me rebuild it. I kept thanking her for her support, not realizing she was the reason I needed support in the first. People often think betrayal happens in grand gestures, but it's these small, almost invisible actions that cause the deepest damage. The way she'd praise me in public only to question me in private, the way she'd stand beside me in success, but whisper doubts into others' ears when I wasn't around. She made sure to look innocent, to appear loyal, so that when things fell apart, no one would ever suspect her. And that's exactly what happened. When I began to lose friends, when opportunities slipped through my hands, when my confidence began to crumble, no one saw her fingerprints. She was the storm that disguised itself as shelter, the shadow that stayed just out of reach of blame. There were moments when I'd sit in silence, wondering if I was imagining it all. That's another thing betrayal does, it distorts your sense of truth. You start second-guessing every feeling, every reaction, every intuition. I kept convincing myself that she wouldn't do this, that no real friend would, that maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, a part of me knew. The uneasy feeling that crawled beneath my skin wasn't paranoia, it was my instincts screaming that something wasn't right. I just didn't want to believe it because believing it meant accepting that someone I cared about was capable of cruelty disguised as care. As her plan unfolded, she grew bolder. The lies became more elaborate, the manipulation more visible to those who didn't know how to read between her lines. She played the victim when needed, painting me as distant, selfish, or ungrateful. It was almost impressive how seamlessly she played her part. She had mastered the role of the innocent one, the misunderstood one, while I was made to look like the problem. People started to believe her version of events because she told them what they wanted to hear. A story that made sense, one that made her seem pure and me, somehow, the villain. There came a point when even I began to lose sight of who I was. I was exhausted from defending myself against rumors that didn't start from strangers, but from someone who knew my truth. Every lie she told seemed to erase a piece of me, and I found myself trapped in a narrative I didn't create. The silent destruction she caused was more than social, it was emotional. It ate away at my trust, at my belief in loyalty, at the innocence of connection. The people who once stood beside me began to drift away, not because I changed, but because she made them believe I did. And yet, through it all, she still smiled in my face. Still hugged me, still called me friend, still pretended to care. That's the terrifying part of betrayal, it allows the betrayer to live two lives, one built on lies and the other on pretense. She lived comfortably in both, while I was drowning in confusion. It wasn't until the silence around me became unbearable that I finally began to see her true nature. Every kind gesture had been a move in her game, every word a manipulation, every act of sympathy a cover for her guilt. The damage she caused wasn't visible to the world, but I felt it in the way I stopped trusting easily, in the way I began questioning everyone's intentions. Her betrayal didn't just wound me, it reshaped me. The version of myself that once believed in simple goodness was gone, replaced by someone who had seen what quiet malice looks like up close. She didn't just try to ruin my life, she tried to ruin my belief in people, in honesty, in friendship. But there's something she underestimated, the resilience that comes from being broken in silence. She believed that by isolating me, she could control the story forever. She didn't realize that truth doesn't stay buried forever, that masks eventually crack under the weight of their own lies. Every move she made, every false smile she wore, every whisper she spread became part of a pattern, one that, when seen clearly, exposed her for what is. The truth never arrives gently, it crashes through the walls built from lies, tearing apart every illusion that once felt safe. For a long time, I lived under the shadow of confusion, surrounded by whispers I couldn't trace, actions I couldn't explain, people turning away for reasons I didn't understand. I kept searching for logic in the chaos she created, trying to believe that everything was just a misunderstanding, that somehow things would make sense if I looked closely enough. But then came the moment that shattered every doubt, the moment when the truth finally broke through, raw and undeniable. It didn't come from her lips, of course, it came from the cracks in her performance, from the inconsistencies in her stories, from the people who started to see the pattern she worked so hard to hide. I remember the first sign. It wasn't dramatic or loud, it was something small, a sentence that didn't match what she'd told someone else, a careless slip that opened a door I wasn't supposed to look through. At first, I brushed it off, the way I had brushed off so many other red flags. But then, another lie followed, and another, until they started connecting like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. The picture that formed was ugly, painful, and real. Every act of kindness she'd shown me had been laced with motive, every word of concern designed to control how others saw me. I had been living in a story she wrote, not realizing I wasn't the hero in her version, I was the obstacle she wanted to destroy. The realization hit me not as anger at first, but as silence, a deep, cold silence that only truth can bring. I didn't scream or confront her immediately. I just stood there, processing how easily I had been fooled by someone who looked me in the eyes and swore loyalty. It's strange how betrayal can exist so quietly for so long, right beside you, until the light of truth exposes its full ugliness. She had woven her deceit so carefully that even when I was standing in the moment of realization isn't just about discovering what someone else has done, it's about discovering how much of yourself you gave to the wrong person. I felt foolish for trusting her so blindly, for ignoring my instincts, for choosing peace over confrontation. I kept thinking about how many times she must have smiled while lying, how many times she must have felt triumph while I stood there, unaware. The truth exposed not just her darkness, but my own innocence. I wasn't naive anymore. The person who once believed in the purity of friendship had been replaced by someone who understood the quiet cruelty of envy. As the truth unfolded, others began to notice too. The facade she had built so confidently began to crack. People who once believed her stories started questioning them. Small inconsistencies turned into gaping holes in her lies. Her expressions grew tighter, her tone sharper, her confidence weaker. You could almost see the fear behind her eyes, the fear of exposure, of losing control over the story she had spent so long fabricating. And in that fear, I saw something I hadn't seen before, her vulnerability. Beneath all the manipulation, there was someone terrified of being forgotten, someone who believed that destroying others was the only way to feel significant. That realization didn't soften me, but it made her motives clearer. Still, knowing the truth didn't make the pain disappear. It's one thing to see someone for who they truly are, it's another to accept that you let them so deep into your life. I wrestled with that for a long time, the anger, the disbelief, the hurt that came from understanding that every kind gesture had been a step in her plan. I wanted to confront her, to demand explanations, but what words could undo what had already been done? The truth wasn't something she could deny anymore. It was visible in her actions, in the way her eyes avoided mine, in the sudden distance between her and those she once controlled. The more truth came to light, the smaller she became in her own game. There was one moment that stands out, the moment she realized that I knew. She didn't confess, didn't apologize, she just froze. Her silence spoke louder than any excuse she could have given. In that instant, the balance shifted. The power she held through deceit was gone, replaced by the weight of her own exposure. I didn't need to argue or defend myself anymore, the truth was doing that for me. The lies she built her world upon were crumbling, piece by piece, and all I had to do was stand still and watch. It was a strange kind of justice, not loud or vengeful, but silent and inevitable. The most powerful thing about truth is that it doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need an audience or proof. It exists quietly, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it does, it destroys everything built on deception. I saw that happening before my eyes. The relationships she had manipulated started falling apart. The trust she had stolen began returning to me in fragments. People started apologizing, some with words, others with actions, as if they finally saw the person I had been all along. It was bittersweet, because while truth cleared my name, it also showed me how fragile trust can be. In the aftermath, I realized how truth exposes not just lies, but character. Some people rise when the truth is revealed, others crumble beneath it. She belonged to the latter. Every facade she built came crashing down, and all that remained was the emptiness she had been running from. For me, the truth was painful, but it was also liberating. It tore away everything false and left me with something real, clarity. And clarity, no matter how hard it comes, is the beginning of strength. When everything falls apart, silence becomes the only space where you can hear your own heartbeat again. I had spent so long fighting invisible battles, defending myself from lies I didn't start, trying to prove truths that no one wanted to see. But when the truth finally revealed itself, there was nothing left to say. The noise faded, and in its place came a deep, almost sacred quiet. It was in that silence that I began to rebuild, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with something quieter, something stronger. Rising from humiliation doesn't happen in front of crowds or under bright lights. It happens in solitude, in the still moments when no one is watching, when your pain stops screaming and starts teaching. I remember the way people used to look at me when her lies were still believed. The pity, the suspicion, the quiet judgment that said more than words ever could. It's strange how quickly admiration turns into doubt once someone plants the right poison. I used to carry that weight everywhere, the shame of being misunderstood, the frustration of having no voice loud enough to fight the narrative she built. But humiliation, if endured with patience, becomes a kind of fire. It burns away everything unnecessary, every illusion, every weakness. The pain that once crushed me became the same force that began to shape me into something unbreakable. There were days when I wanted to disappear, to stop showing up altogether. The humiliation wasn't just public, it was personal. It seeped into how I saw myself, how I spoke, how I walked into a room. I questioned every move, afraid of how it might be twisted again. But then came a moment when I realized that staying small was exactly what she wanted. The humiliation wasn't the end, it was the test. It was meant to break me, but it also revealed something she never expected: resilience. The kind of strength that doesn't come from pride, but from survival. I stopped trying to convince anyone of my truth and started living it. Rising from humiliation isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about deciding that your worth isn't up for debate, that no lie can define who you are. I started focusing on small steps, showing up even when I didn't want to, speaking even when my voice shook, smiling even when my heart felt heavy. Each act of courage, no matter how small, was a rebellion against the image she tried to paint of me. I began to find peace in my own silence, in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the storm has already passed, and I'm still standing. People began to notice the change before I did. The same ones who once believed her whispers started to see through them. They watched me carry myself differently, not with bitterness, but with calm. That calm confused them, even unsettled her. She expected anger, retaliation, drama. But all she got was silence, a silence that spoke louder than any revenge could. Because there's power in quiet strength, in choosing to rise without noise. When you stop fighting for validation, you start attracting truth naturally. Slowly, people began to return, not out of pity, but out of realization. They saw what she had tried to hide, and they saw who I had become in spite of it. The path to rebuilding is lonely. No one tells you that. Everyone praises the comeback, but no one talks about the nights spent questioning whether it's even worth it. The humiliation lingers, echoing in your memory long after the world has moved on. But it's in those moments that you learn who you really are. I learned to be comfortable with silence, to draw strength from solitude, to find peace not of judgment, your need for validation, your desire for revenge. I faced them all, and each time I chose peace instead, I took back another piece of my power. She didn't know how to fight that. You can't fight someone who refuses to play your game. My silence became her mirror, it showed her the smallness of her actions, the emptiness behind her triumph. The more I grew, the more her lies looked out of place. People stopped listening to her not because I proved her wrong, but because my strength made her words irrelevant. That's the quiet power of rising, it doesn't shout, it simply outlasts. With each passing day, the weight of humiliation began to lift. I started to feel lighter, freer, stronger. My confidence wasn't built on pride anymore, it was built on endurance. I realized I didn't need to rebuild the version of myself that existed before the betrayal. That version was too trusting, too forgiving, too eager to please. The new me was grounded, self-assured, and unshakable. I stopped needing to be liked and started focusing on be. There's something powerful about rising quietly after being humiliated. It's not dramatic or loud, but it's unstoppable. The people who once doubted you are left speechless, because your success doesn't demand their approval, it exists in spite of it. The woman who tried to ruin me couldn't understand that kind of strength. She measured power by how much control she had over others, but I learned that real power comes from how much control you have over yourself. I learned to move forward without the need to explain, without the need to prove, without the need to hate. My silence became my statement, my endurance became my revenge, and my peace became the proof that I had truly risen. Karma never announces its arrival, it moves quietly, almost invisibly, waiting for the perfect moment to return what was sent out. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't plot. I didn't scheme. I didn't waste my energy trying to make her pay for what she did. I simply let go and focused on surviving. But there's something unexplainable about the universe. It listens even when you don't speak. It balances what humans try to twist. When I stepped back and stopped fighting her lies, life stepped forward and began fighting for me. The same hands that once built traps for me started to get caught in their own strings. The same words she used to manipulate others began to circle back, exposing her in ways I never could have planned. Karma doesn't need help, it just needs patience. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. The charm that once made her untouchable began to fade. People who once hung onto her every word started noticing cracks in her stories. The confidence she wore like armor began to look forced. She had spent so much time crafting an image of herself that she forgot the truth always has a way of showing up uninvited. Her lies began to contradict one another, her friendships began to fracture, and the attention she craved started to turn into suspicion. It wasn't me pulling any strings. There's a strange satisfaction in watching life do what you could never do yourself. Not because of hatred, but because of justice. For so long, I had believed she'd walk away untouched, that her cruelty would be rewarded and her manipulations would keep her safe. But life doesn't forget, even when people do. The very same people she had turned against me began to see who she truly was. One by one, they distanced themselves, not because of what I said, but because of what she revealed through her actions. It was poetic in its timing. Everything she used to destroy me became the reason she destroyed herself. I began hearing stories, quiet murmurs of how things were falling apart for her. The job she once bragged about lost its stability, the relationships she built on lies began to crumble, the people she tried to control started leaving. At first, I didn't believe it. I didn't want to. I had stopped caring about what happened to her. But it was impossible not to notice the shift. The same confidence that once intimidated me was replaced by a defensive desperation. She was no longer the one in control, she was the one being questioned. Her charm no longer worked because it was tainted by truth. Once people see through a mask, it never fits again. Karma's beauty lies in its fairness. It doesn't rush, it doesn't scream, it doesn't always strike in grand gestures. Sometimes it's slow, unfolding piece by piece, allowing the guilty to feel the weight of what they've done through their own consequences. She had spent years building her identity on deceit, feeding off the trust of others, and now every foundation she stood on was cracking. The same manipulation she used to control others began to turn against her. People started questioning her motives, her sincerity, her loyalty. It was as if the world had begun to reflect her own behavior back at her, showing her exactly what it felt like to be betrayed. I didn't gloat, but I couldn't ignore the irony. The woman who wants tea. There's something freeing about letting go of revenge and trusting that the world will find its balance. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from seeing justice served with my own eyes. But what I learned is that closure comes from peace. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to admit what she did. I just needed to know that what's meant for you can't be taken away by deceit, and what's not meant for someone will slip through their hands no matter how tightly they try to hold it. Watching karma unfold wasn't about satisfaction, it was about understanding that everything truly does return to its source. As her downfall grew clearer, I noticed something even more profound. I no longer cared the way I thought I would. I had imagined feeling victorious, validated, vindicated. Instead, I felt distant, detached. Her pain didn't bring me joy, it simply confirmed what I already knew, that truth always survives. I didn't wish her harm, but I couldn't ignore that what she was facing was the echo of what she'd done. That's the thing about karma, it doesn't punish, it teaches. It forces people to experience the very lessons they refuse to learn through empathy. Over time, I stopped following her story altogether. The whispers reached me occasionally, but they no longer stirred any emotion. I was too focused on rebuilding my own peace, too busy nurturing what I almost lost. I realized that when you let go, the universe takes over. When you stop trying to control justice, life handles it in ways far more fitting than you ever could. And it always comes when it's least expected, when the person who caused harm has finally started to believe they've escaped it. The irony of her situation was that she had spent so long trying to make others fall that she never saw the ground crumbling beneath her own feet. The image she worked so hard to protect became the very thing that destroyed her, because she couldn't live up to the lies she created. Every truth she tried to bury rose up one by one, and the audience that once cheered for her turned silent. That's how karma works, not as punishment, but as revelation. It exposes, it humbles, it balances. In the end, it wasn't my anger that destroyed her, it was her own actions returning home. The same energy she poured into harming others came back multiplied. And I learned something powerful through that. Sometimes, the greatest act of revenge is not revenge at all, it's walking away, staying silent, and letting time do what time does best. True victory isn't found in revenge, it's found in the quiet peace that comes after you've let go. There was a time when I thought the only way to heal was to make her feel what I felt, to make her experience the pain she caused, to show her the weight of her actions. But as the dust began to settle, I realized something deeper. Revenge feeds the wound, resilience heals it. I didn't need her suffering to feel whole again. What I needed was to reclaim my peace, to rebuild the version of myself that her betrayal tried to destroy. And that began when I stopped looking backward and started focusing on who I was becoming. There's a strange kind of power in choosing not to retaliate. It's not weakness, it's control. It's deciding that your energy is too valuable to waste on bitterness. I began to understand that revenge might give you a moment of satisfaction, but it also ties you to the very pain you're trying to escape. Every thought of payback keeps you chained to the person who wronged you, while forgiveness, real forgiveness, not the kind that excuses what happened, but the kind that releases it, frees you completely. I didn't forgive her for her sake. I forgave her so that her shadow would stop following me. Resilience is born in the aftermath, in the moments when you realize that no one is coming to fix you, that no apology can undo what was done. I started rebuilding piece by piece, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I owed it to myself. Each morning I woke up and chose peace over resentment. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to scream, to remind the world of the injustice, to demand acknowledgement. But then I remembered, vindication isn't external, it's internal. You don't need people to see the truth when you already live it. I started investing my energy into growth, into finding meaning in the pain rather than letting it define me. The process of resilience is quiet and deeply personal. It's waking up and deciding that your story won't end in bitterness. It's refusing to let the betrayal become your identity. I learned to take comfort in the simple things again, in work, in solitude, in self-respect. There's a peace that comes when you realize you don't have to fight anymore. The war is over, and you survived. That survival, in itself, is victory. Every scar became proof of endurance, not of weakness. Every memory of what she did reminded me not of the hurt, but of how far I had come. People often mistake peace for passivity, but it's the opposite. It takes strength to remain calm after being wronged, it takes courage to choose silence when you have every rear. Through it all, I began to notice something unexpected, gratitude. Gratitude not for the pain itself, but for what it revealed. It showed me who I was when everything fell apart. It taught me how to stand alone, how to trust myself, how to walk away with dignity instead of anger. I realized that without her betrayal, I might never have discovered the depth of my own strength. Sometimes the things that break you are the same things that rebuild you, shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and untouchable. That realization made the pain worth surviving. When I looked back, I saw the difference between revenge and resilience clearly. Revenge is about her, it keeps her at the center of your story. Resilience is about me, it makes me the center again. I no longer needed to see her downfall because my rise was enough. The peace I found wasn't loud, but it was powerful. It didn't need validation or witnesses. It lived in the way I carried myself, in the way I no longer flinched at her name, in the way I smiled knowing she no longer had any power over my emotions. Life eventually comes full circle, and the universe rewards those who choose growth over destruction. My victory wasn't in watching her lose, it was in realizing I had nothing left to lose. The worst had already happened, and yet I was still standing. Stronger. Wiser. Calmer. She could no longer reach me because I had risen beyond the place where her actions could touch me. That's the beauty of resilience, it transforms pain into protection. The person who tried to ruin you becomes the reason you can never be ruined again. In the end, I didn't need revenge because I had peace. I didn't need her pain because I had purpose. I didn't need validation because I had self-worth. I learned that the real triumph isn't making your enemy fall, it's realizing you no longer see them as the enemy at all. The chapter she tried to end became the one that defined my strength. And as I moved forward, I understood that the story was any.